essentially, we're trying to give a kind of a different spin on suits than a classic brand would in terms of the approach on the content production. Like you mentioned, using martial artists, using breakdancers, using professional BMX riders, using snowboarders,
Wow.
using things that normally you would not see somebody doing in a suit.
Hey e-commerce friends, today I'm very excited to have Max Perez on the show. Max invented basically a James Bond suit, literally. It has nanotechnology inside. It's a zero maintenance suit using nanotechnology, as I mentioned. It has the benefits to be odor-free, wrinkle-proof, liquid-proof. It requires less cleaning, there's no ironing, and a lot of more benefits. So today I'm very pleased to talk to Max. Max is also a mentor to some of our mutual friends in our network, where he's mentoring e-commerce entrepreneurs. And Max, please allow me today to be your student. I would love to learn a little bit more about your background, your mindset, and your approach to e-commerce, especially also with your approach to design when it comes to suits. So Max, welcome to the show.
Yeah, thank you so much, Marco. It's great to be here.
Fantastic. Can you tell us a little bit more about your background?
Sure. So my background started so I'm from Canada originally, Montreal. I started studying in graphic design before I made my way to China. So my family runs a trading company in China for over 30 years. So my dad saw the future of China 30 years ago, came down here, opened a company, brought my two older brothers, who are much older than me, by the way, 20 plus years, brought them here to join the family business, started off in garment fashion trading. My uncle as well has a big clothing brand in Canada. So, I mean, this is something that our whole family has been doing for a while. My grandmother, by the way, was also doing, she was a seamstress, making some luxury clothing back in the day. But anyhow, when I started studying graphic design in Canada, my brothers kind of pushed me to come to China. They told me like China's the future and I should definitely come check it out and perhaps consider studying here. So I got here at 17 years old. I had done one semester in university in Canada. And at that point, I started studying Chinese. And I excelled at that very well and actually was offered a job right out of school as a creative assistant for a big PR firm. So that's how my professional career started, even though in the back of my mind, I always wanted to get into fashion. But I was young, the money was great. It was an opportunity, so I took it.
Right.
So I worked with this company. I grew up in the ranks for about, I worked there for 5 years. Within the second year, I was promoted to creative director. I, by the way, taught myself everything about web design, graphic design, as well as some sales and marketing, all self-taught, and grew really quickly in the company, the creative director on the second year. And within the fourth year, I became one of the managing directors for one of our departments, managing things like visuals and so on for some big clients we had. Like, for example, Bacardi Group. So we were working with alcohol brands, furniture brands, and so on. So I was managing part of the events, the visual creation, and so on and so forth. And that lasted, like I said, a total of 5 years.
Yeah.
Towards the fifth year, I decided that that was it. I had gained enough experience and I really wanted to start my own business in fashion. So at that point, I had a friend of mine who actually was interested in partnering up. He offered to give me equity. He had a lot of money and he believed in the idea I had, wanted to give me equity. I approached my family at that point saying, hey, can you guys help me to bring the product to life, since that was their expertise. And my family spun on me and said, hey, don't take money from that guy. Let's partner up us and let's start this business as a family business, right? And we'll help you out for, the procurement, the supply chain, all that kind of stuff. And you can focus on design and marketing. And in the end, that's the route I took. So we signed an agreement, my brothers and I. And at that point, I actually went to fashion school. So I wanted to really do this the right way. My brothers as well. So I enrolled in a school called IFA. It's a university from Paris that had a subsidiary in Shanghai. It's the International Fashion Academy. So I studied there, pattern making, design and whatnot. And when I felt, again, I wasn't doing it for a diploma, I was doing it for the experience and the knowledge. So I didn't finish the entirety of the program. I kind of dropped out halfway through. My teachers were also telling me that I had pretty much learned everything I needed to learn and didn't need to take, especially knowing that I was going to start a business right behind it, not looking for a job and so on. They felt as well that I had learned enough in those that time that I was there. And yeah, that was basically the start of the brand. At that point, this must have been, I guess, 2016 when we started to when I had finished school. While I was in school, I was working on developing the product, and that's pretty much where the brand or company started. It was at that point.
Amazing, Max. Interesting to see how so many different resources fell into the same place. You had a corporate career in China. Your family is out of the industry. You learned how to become a businessman in this career path, and then you went to design school to learn the skill sets there. So you have all the right ingredients to make this world's best suit, almost to speak. Now, when was the right time then? When did you start at XSuit?
So when I was in school, I was still unsure in terms of which product I wanted to come up with, right?
Yeah.
At that point, I was quite a fashion guy, and I was considering going into streetwear. That was when the whole streetwear craze was kind of at its peak. And there was a lot of luxury streetwear brand names like Amiri, Fear of God, Off-White, brands of the sort. And that's kind of the direction I wanted to take. But I felt the market was oversaturated. And there was already so many brands, so much competition in the market. When I was working in the corporate world, I had to wear suits every day. That was, obviously the uniform. And to be honest with you, I really liked how people perceived you. You know how we have that saying, don't judge a book by its cover. I think that it's completely wrong when it comes especially to business and so on. A lot of people, as much as we shouldn't judge people by their outer look, we still naturally subconsciously do. And
it's like an instinct.
It is. You kind of break out someone before
Absolutely.
you get to meet them, and you're like, oh, okay. You kind of, box people out like, oh, this is how this guy, until you meet them, and then you realize they could be someone completely different. So I was young working in that corporate company, and because I was wearing a suit, also fortunate enough to have a beard at a young age, I was given this impression that I was like an older gentleman who had more experience and so on because of my attire. So when I was conceptualizing, which product I wanted to get into, I remember there was a few events that happened within a few weeks apart. I went to an event, like a big event, fashion show or something. I was wearing a suit. Coming out of the taxi, as I pulled my leg out of the taxi, my pant ripped at the center seam. There was another event that I was at, got in the event, took a glass of whatever it might have been, champagne or something, and accidentally the waiter bumped into me, spilt on myself. And then the whole night I was smelling champagne off my suit.
It's ruined.
And there was just a few things like that back to back, where then I was kind of sitting with my brothers one day, just, having a drink. And I'm like, hey, why nobody came out with a stretch suit? I've bought, I don't know, 15, 20 suits by that time. I was looking for comfortable suit. There was always advertising a stretch, but they were like 2-3% spandex on the outside. The inside lining was still stiff. And it just hit me. It was kind of an epiphany. Like, why is there no like real stretch suit? Like, we're talking about Lululemon style fabrics made in a suit. And that's kind of like how the idea came to me. It was, again, like a combination and a compilation of small events, experience, and whatnot, that it just, that's how an epiphany works. So it just all came together in that one moment where I was like, that's what I should do, create a comfortable suit that's actually useful in our modern lifestyle, which is, very dynamic, active, where you're going from here to there, you're moving a lot, you're traveling a lot, and so on.
Yeah.
And that's where the idea sparked and further developed. So with that in mind, saying, hey, I want a comfortable suit, it kind of went into, well, let's make it not just physically comfortable, but also comfortable in the way you maintain it, right? We all know suits are a hassle to maintain. You get it wrinkled, you need an iron, you need a steamer, you get it dirty, you can't wash it at home. You got to take it to the dry cleaner, drive down, spend 15, 20
Yeah.
bucks, drive it back. You know, you're essentially, you're babying the suit. And that's where that second part of the product features came into play.
Okay, Max, you're just talking out of my soul. I need to be honest with you. I have such a suit phobia because of all the points that you just mentioned. They literally happened to me as well. I used to be in the corporate world myself. I was wearing suits and chic clothes, but I just hated them because of all the reasons. They were not comfortable, all the pain points there, maintenance. So yeah, you give me a lot of hope, and I'm really curious to dig in with you on that. So when you had this idea, and yeah, the most ideas come from oneself. You had all those pain points, and what were the next steps? How did you start your design with the suit, and how did you get into those nanotechnologies? You have actually on your website a whole page that is only dedicated to the technologies that you're using, which is really mind-boggling to me to read that through.
So we started obviously with the fabric, since, you know, in fashion, that's one of the two most important components. So you have fabric and you have obviously construction. So when we looked at fabric, obviously I went from the top down, meaning luxury high-end brands, all the way to the mass market stuff. So I was looking at Zegna, Armani, things of the kind, buying samples, checking them out, all the way down to something maybe more mass market like Suit Supply, even Zara. I was really trying to get a widespread on what's available and to kind of understand better. Not only suits, by the way, I was also buying, you know, jackets and sportswear, and really spending the time to analyze what fabric makes sense, because you can't just use any kind of sport fabric on a suit. It won't drape well. It won't have that suit outer look. If you're not using the right fabric, it'll give you the impression of a track suit, just with the suit lapel. So that was the first step in understanding the fabric we wanted to use, you know, the grammage, things like, again, when it comes to knit fabrics, which are very different than woven, there's a lot of things to consider, like shrinkage, like, you know, when you wear a knit fabric over an extended period of time, like your t-shirt, you'll see it starts to bubble, which is very normal of knit fabrics. If you're wearing sweatpants, you start to get that bubbling around your knee after you sit down all day long. Super normal of knit. So I was trying to find ways of mitigating that and having it as less as possible, since a suit does have to have this kind of outer appearance. So the fabric was definitely very important. We spent a lot of time looking for the best fabric out there, not looking at price necessarily, but more so at quality and the kind of features that we wanted, the hand feel, the weight of it. You know, if you look at that technology page, something else that I mentioned is obviously the testing to do with the fabric. So we spent a lot of time testing it, specifically because we wanted the suit to be machine washable. So we took it through all kinds of wear and tear, wash cycles, and so on, to make sure that it could last as long as a woven suit. So once we had kind of decided the fabric we wanted to go with, we had gone through all that testing, that's when the whole no maintenance nanotechnology came into play. So we knew of nanotechnology, and we wanted to make sure that the nanotechnology, as it is a finishing that's applied throughout the manufacturing of the fabric, that it was not going to affect the fabric's core integrity in terms of the hand feel, as these kind of finishings normally can make fabrics feel stiffer, can also affect its shrinkage and you know, stability. So you know, we were going through a bunch of different brands of nanotechnology. The biggest one, by the way, is Gore-Tex. So they use nanotechnology on a lot of their fabrics. They're kind of like the industry standard. And we were looking at all the different alternatives. I mean, nanotechnology, just like fabrics can go from, you know, a suit fabric can go from $2-3 a meter all the way to infinity. right? As you're getting into the luxury
Right.
brands.
Right.
Nanotechnology, the same thing. It's a chemical that can go from, say, 10 cents a meter all the way to, $2, $3, $4, $5 a meter, right? So we were testing out the right formula, making sure that also the chemicals are not harmful to both the environment and your skin as you wear it for an extended period of time. Obviously, the longer lasting you want this finishing to be, the more amount of chemicals need to be added, the more it affects the actual fabric. So this was, again, a lot of trial and error, a lot of problems in the development stage, right? Also, you need to remember when you're sampling something, it's very different than mass producing it, since sampling is in a controlled environment, mass producing. So you have to consider all these things when developing such a product. And it took, start to finish, took about a year to get to the final product, to make sure that we were happy. Now, was I completely happy? No. Obviously, as a creator, you're always, you see things that maybe the mass market will not see, most people will not see. So at that point, was I happy? No. But how much longer can you drag a development stage? You have to put out the product on the market for people to give you their honest feedback and for you to keep doing those improvements. But yeah, that was basically, the entirety of the design process. In terms of actual patterns, things of the kind, that's pretty simple today. I mean, it's pretty standardized. We used some Italian pattern maker, made sure that it fit the 80-20 rule, made sure it fit 80% of the people at the start, using more of a modern cut, neither slim nor loose. And details, likewise, something a little bit more modern, that can be liked by both the older generation as much as a younger one. At the launch, I also launched a little bit more funky fly style with the hood. I don't know if you saw that on the Kickstarter page. We had like a hooded suit with zippers, with like sport cuffs, which was to further emphasize that this is like, the next generation of suits. So of course, the classic one was the one that sold the most, but I decided to launch something a little bit avant-garde out there, just to further underline what we were trying to create here, which was like, the in-between of the sports world and the classic suiting world.
Yeah.
And yeah, that's pretty much start to finish how the whole design process went.
Amazing. Yeah, no, this is totally new knowledge to me. I have to be honest. I have not so much of a fashion background, and it's very interesting to me to learn about this process. So thank you for sharing that. I also want to talk a bit more about your Kickstarter campaign, but maybe before we get into that, when you created this suit first, when you designed it, what target persona did you have in mind? Was it like younger people, just like you in the corporate world, or entrepreneurs, or what was your thinking? What was your customer target persona when you designed it?
So this is very interesting because essentially, when I started the brand, my idea was to convert young people want to wear suits again. So, in my circle at that time, I was seeing that suits were no longer the go-to outfit, right? If you had a choice, you would definitely go more for a t-shirt, pair of jeans, a more casual shirt. And that was initially my idea with the suit was, hey, you know what? I am going to create a product that a younger demographic, the ones that are starting their career out, would really want to get into. We're talking about people that are, say, 25 to 35 years old, right? Younger men. So that's what I originally had envisioned for the brand, which ironically shifted super quickly after launching. And actually, our target demographic became more 35 to 50. And I guess the reason being that those guys were more used to wearing suits, were wearing suits way more often than, a young adult. And the solutions that our product offered were more tailored to them, as they felt the problem more, since they wore suits for X amount of years. Whereas a younger guy might have different priorities. He's right out of school, he's looking for something cheap on sale. He might go to Zara, just try to get something cheap as he's starting his career. He also doesn't really know the pain points of a suit because he didn't really
Right.
experience it. He didn't wear a suit for 5-10 years to be like, oh yeah, I've had these issues, right? So funny enough, our demographic shifted very quickly after launching.
Okay. Yeah, that's amazing. This is exactly my age demographic right now, and I'm feeling very inspired because, as I mentioned, I had the same pain points as you did in the past. And in one of our latest episodes, I had the opportunity to talk to our mutual friend Harrison, who has designed like a travel bag for the modern man as well. And I saw this technology and this level of thinking that he put into his travel bag, also on a way more chic level. And that really inspired me to overthink my fashion. So yeah, it's a great inspiration here. Um, so before Kickstarter, what prompted you? You said your family was very traditional, in a sense. I think brick and mortar businesses and so on. You are taking the approach D2C, like you have your own online store. What is your inspiration for that move?
So funny enough, that was not the initial plan.
Okay.
Being in China, they are at that time at least were way more advanced when it came to e-commerce than the Western world was. A platform called Taobao, which is
Mhm.
essentially Amazon of Asia, was just going through the roof. And this is where it was the start of Amazon. Amazon hadn't yet had the market share they have today.
Oh.
Amazon was just starting. They just had very select product. Taobao had everything. And what I mean by everything, like food, you could buy a car, you could buy whatever you want on Taobao. It was endless. And I, at that point, started to shift. Even before we started the brand, I was already shifting, say 50, 60, 70% of my purchases to Taobao, to the online e-commerce. And we just saw the opportunity with Taobao, my brothers and I. Hey, we have to launch this product. First of all, in China, as everybody knows, China was becoming, this buying power. So we're like, okay, it makes sense as foreigners, foreign brand, to come into China and launch it online TTC. So
Mhm.
I was already preparing to have this launched online. That was already the thought process that was going through my mind. And what ended up happening was we had a good friend here, Vuk, who launched a successful Indiegogo campaign. So he did a battery pack for computers, right? A larger battery
Yeah.
pack that could charge your MacBook, say whatever, 2-3 charges. He launched it on Indiegogo as I was kind of preparing my marketing material, and he did about $2 million US on Indiegogo. So it was like a
Mhm.
massive campaign that exploded.
Wow.
And I was hanging out with him and we were talking about it. And he just told me like, "Hey Max, why don't you launch this? China has crowdfunding, but it's not as big as the US, and people don't believe it as much." He's like, "Why don't you launch this product? I mean, it has the whole tech element, which fits in well with Kickstarter's demographic. Why don't you try launching this on Kickstarter?" And at that point, that was the pivotal moment where we're like, hey, you know what? Why don't we try it? What do we have to lose? Right? Worst case scenario, we don't get funded and we keep going the route we wanted to originally, launching this in China through Taobao and so on. Best case scenario, it succeeds and we get
Mhm.
a bunch of customers in the US. So that was kind of where the decision was made for Kickstarter, was at that point.
Okay.
Um, yeah, please.
And it did succeed, actually. So you were raising 650K, which was the most funded suit ever, and that was in 2017, right?
Correct. Yeah. So again, this all happened super quickly. It was about, I guess, 3-4 months before we launched, that I started
Yeah.
preparing all the material. I did a lot of the graphic design myself. I got an agency to do a nice video for us, and managing the ads, lead generation, and so on. And again, we didn't think too much of it. I had put I think we did a $50,000 goal, right?
Mhm, mhm.
And we reached that, I think. So we were up the day we launched it. We were obviously in China, so we launched it our nighttime, which was like daytime for the US. And my brothers and I were hanging out together, just looking at, how is this going to perform. We obviously pushed it as well to our network and so on. And we
Yeah.
just saw us hit the $50,000 mark. I think it was in 12 hours that we hit that mark. which was crazy.
Wow.
And we just saw, like, I remember, I think it was like 24 hours. We hit like 70K maybe, or so. I can't remember exactly the time frame. I think we have it all on Kickstarter, like the timeline of how much we hit. We were like, obviously sharing it with our community. And then at that point we were like, oh wow, like there's a big interest in the product. So we got a PR agency right away. This was like a couple, 2, 3, 4 days down the line, got a PR agency. They got us like into Business Insider, Mashable, and all these other magazines, which just, amplified the effect of all of this. I remember the Business Insider video had like 4.5 million views on Facebook, 1.5 million views on YouTube. That was one of the videos that went viral, and obviously, helped us to propel all of this much quicker. So yeah, it was obviously a very big success in our eyes, where we had anticipated 50K, ended up with 650.
That is amazing. Yeah, very impressive. And you mentioned a keyword there. You have been working with a marketing agency already throughout this process that can kind of help you to take off the marketing word from your shoulders. And also in our pre-interview, you mentioned that everything that you do is being outsourced to a marketing agency. Yeah, what is your approach with that when you outsource it?
Just to correct you, we used to
Okay.
outsource everything, and we don't anymore. So our entire marketing department is in-house today. To be honest with you, in terms of marketing agencies, for me, it's really a hit and miss. We've worked with 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 agencies to date, as far as I can remember, and really hit or miss and hard to have essentially the way I see it is that when you're running an e-commerce brand, you cannot be the jack of all trades, both when it comes to your product, meaning, you obviously don't want to disperse yourself too much on your product lineup. But I think the same can be said when it comes to your operations, right? Especially when you're in the startup stage, right? Of course, when you are bigger, when you have a lot of money, your pockets are deep, then you could get into everything. But when you start off, you need to kind of understand where your strengths are and where your weaknesses are. So that can be done in a couple different ways. One way can be partnering up where you have weaknesses, right? So when you start a business, let's say you are a designer and that's what you're good at, but you're not an operational guy nor a marketing sales guy. So you could find people who are and partner with them and say, hey, let's do this together, split it 3 ways. You take care of the operation. That's your strong. You don't know anything about product. I'll take care of the product and you take care of the marketing. Or you can go, hey, you know what? I want to manage this business. I want to be the sole owner of the business. So then you have to go through agencies, right? So operations, outsourcing, whatever it may be, shipping, manufacturing, finding a trading company to help you source the product, finding a 3PL to manage the warehousing, the shipping, and so on. Same thing, marketing, finding a marketing agency to do all the lead acquisition and nurturing and so on. So, obviously at the beginning, I was managing a little bit more the product as well as the operations. So we started by outsourcing the marketing. And we obviously switched a lot of marketing agencies as I was not pleased with the results, all the way till about, I'm going to say 2020, the end of 2020 is when we started to internalize the department.
I see. Okay.
Yeah, and from there on to today, everything's done in-house. Now, in-house is a big word. We have about 12 people, I would say, that are working in the marketing. Not every single one of those 12 people are actually full-time employees in the office. I do have freelancers that we use. Not necessarily freelancers, I would say more like long-term contractors, right? But it's all done within our sphere of control and whatnot. So it's not like I'm sending a brief, the marketing agency is doing things, sending it back to us. We are controlling every single aspect of the marketing.
I see. And Max, when I ask you now, to what extent were you inside of the marketing strategy and right now? Yeah.
To what extent am I involved in it?
Yes.
Oh, like completely in every single step of the process.
Okay.
I'm actually pretty involved in every single department of the company. I obviously have some very good coworkers in the company that, you know, I value every single one of those people's opinion.
Yeah.
And, you know, I trust a lot of their judgment, but at the same time, I am involved, not to say to micromanage or to be on top of people's head, but because I want to, you know, be a part of the entire company's growth. And I value every single one of the departments that operate here, everything from design to production to shipping to customer service to sales and then retention. So in terms of marketing, super involved. I do not take the approach where I have the final word. You know, the people that, like I said, I work with, I feel are very competent and I really value their opinion. I always will give my opinion. I will never bite my tongue. But in the end, I give a lot of responsibility to the individual in making the right judgment call. As you know, if not, they would not be in the position that they are. And also, I consider our company to be like a big family. You know, so I don't think that in a family the right approach is to come in as the boss, totalitarian boss, and be like, oh, this is how it's gonna be, and like that's it. You know, of course there are some places where you need to be a little bit tougher, right? It cannot also just be like a big playpen where everything goes. There are some, let's say, rules, right? Some guidelines that we go by. But in general, every decision is made as a team in general, as a team as a whole.
Okay.
And yeah, so yeah, very involved definitely in marketing. I think that's an integral part in every DTC company is the marketing.
Yeah, makes sense. So every employee is running out of their field of competency and making their own judgments at the end, which is great. It enables them with a lot of more responsibility. I'm curious, you already mentioned your marketing approaches when it came to the Kickstarter event. And what worked really well for you is your own personal network and the PR agency that you mentioned that spread out into all those different news channels and whatnot. For you right now, what are the marketing channels at this stage that you're focusing on?
So marketing channels altogether, of course, top of funnel, that'll always be advertising, online ads. You know, I think that as a DTC brand, it doesn't really matter what product you're pushing. I think advertising will always be number one in terms of both spend and lead acquisition. Now, the actual advertising channel can differ depending the demographic, right? So as an example, if you're targeting, you know, a younger demographic, that might be TikTok over Instagram. As we all know, TikTok has, you know, a bigger following and engagement rate. But, you know, regardless, advertising will always be king for the foreseeable future, as far as I see it. So yeah, advertising, very important. We obviously go into Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, Google ads. And I think that's pretty much it for advertising. Then, of course, that's more top of funnel, right? So now you have people's eyes on your website. So then website is very important. So everything from design to the conversion rate optimization, which is something that's a little bit more intricate and micro. This comes a little bit later on. I don't think at the beginning it's something that you need to worry too much about when you're starting off, but it is quite important. CRO, you know, making sure your website, your visitors aren't falling through. Then, of course, you want to make sure you're going into email and SMS marketing. So capturing those leads, depending the product you're selling. A lot of products, especially higher ticket items, will not be impulse purchases. It will take a bit of time for people to kind of do their research, come back, see you 2-3 times before they make a purchase. So making sure you collect their emails, their phone numbers, and you remarket to them. Nurturing, again, an ad is just like a very quick thing that doesn't, your brain can't absorb all the information. So taking the time to actually explain to them what your product does, how it benefits them, and so on. That can be better done through email, SMS, of course, your website as well. Social media. Now, again, advertising is done on social media primarily, at the exception of Google search. So making sure your social media looks good is important. As you know, a lot of people that'll come on Instagram, see an ad, the first thing they might do is click on that little icon to go onto your account. I think that social media marketing is going to depend greatly on your audience, your demographic, and so on. I believe that our audience is not as engaged on social media, being that they are 35 plus. Based on what we've seen, they're higher net worth people. They don't have the time to be super engaging on social media, whereas a younger demographic, maybe more females, things of the kind, they might spend more time on social media. So depending who your demographic is, that's how you know what kind of strategy you want to implement on social media, whether it's just a catalog, whether you want it to be like a very community-centric place where you're sharing content, whether it's a lot of UGC and so on. So social media definitely has its place, and it goes hand in hand with advertising. Then the other aspect, which goes with the other point of advertising, which is Google search, has to do with as well SEO. So SEO is quite important. SEO has a higher intent than social media advertising. People normally are coming on Google to look for something with the intent to find something, to purchase something. That's why Amazon is more powerful of a platform, because normally people come on Amazon looking to purchase. Nobody goes on Amazon just to say, hey, I'm going to go read that blog, right? They come on with that intent. So I think SEO is quite important, especially, again, to do with your demographic. So something like a suit, it's more expensive. It's not something that you're going to just buy immediately, right? So that's something that you're definitely going to be researching on Google before you purchase. Whereas toilet paper, if you're in the toilet paper industry, I don't think people are necessarily Googling which is the best toilet paper, what are the different plies, and so on, right? So again, knowing your demographic, your segment, and so on is important in all of that. The last thing that we also do marketing wise will be affiliates and PR. I bundle those together. PR, obviously there's a couple ways of doing PR. You can do paid PR, you can do earned PR. Tricky, expensive. You want to make sure you're riding a wave. Very hard to get just PR out of nowhere. Like I mentioned on Kickstarter, we waited to see the boom before we started the PR, because we were riding that wave. So the wave was there, the demand was there. That's a good time to plug PR, because then they're riding with you, and they'll be, oh my God, this product is exploding. Now's the time to write about it. Exactly. So that's what PR wants, right? But I bundle it with affiliates. Why bundle it with affiliates is because affiliates essentially are a form of PR. They are doing some kind of public relation for you. You can definitely find some smaller media outlets like blogs and so on who will take a commission off sales that they bring in from their platform. There are also some paid PR outlets, even big boys, that will write up to get commission on articles and so on. Obviously, that kind of paid PR will not be centric on your product and brand. It will be more centric on a subject and then just discreetly plugging your product in. But that's also a great channel of acquisition if done right. I believe that's the main channels that we work on primarily. There is one other thing to mention when it comes to these channels. These are channels, but to be able to do these channels properly, there's another aspect of the marketing, which is the content. The content is super important. Every single one of those channels has a form of content that needs to be created, whether that be video, whether that be pictures, whether that be graphics, whether that be copywriting in the form of articles, blogs, and so on. Every one of those channels you cannot just go onto those channels without having the right content to go along with them. And this is where having the right content is far more important than trying to have multiple channels. So, especially when you're a starting company, you don't have all the resources to spread yourself thin. Doing something as basic as focusing on great video content to push on Facebook, and then a good email flow segment, that basic formula will be enough for you to scale at the get-go, right? The only last thing that I would include in there is having a good landing page as well, right, where people can convert. So I think that's a great starting formula before you start to expand.
That's an amazing tip here, just as a simple framework to start out with. Thank you, Max. I have my eyes on the clock, and we're getting soon to the end. But there's one burning question, and you just mentioned the content there. I have been browsing over your YouTube channel, and you guys are doing amazing stuff there. You have been doing some marketing stunts. Even you hire martial artists that are wearing the suits, and yeah, you're using whole shows basically on your YouTube channel. Can you talk briefly a little bit about what your concept is when it comes to your YouTube content?
So actually, YouTube is not something that we spend too much energy on currently. It's something that we just started about, I would say 6 months ago, and we are
Mhm.
planning now in Q4 to really start pumping intensely. So we're just doing some small tests, reusing content from Facebook, Instagram, and so on. But essentially, we're trying to give a kind of a different spin on suits than a classic brand would in terms of the approach on the content production. Like you mentioned, using martial artists, using break dancers, using professional BMX riders, using snowboarders,
Wow.
using things that normally you would not see somebody doing in a suit. That's just one of the various content approaches that we're taking. We want to be bold. We want to be different. We do not want to follow the status quo in terms of how a suit should be worn. Just to further underline, specifically the stretch of our suit. Since it does have a crazy amount of stretch, it enables you to do pretty much anything you would in some sportswear. So, I think that, like I mentioned, content being super important, that is definitely an area that we spend a lot of time and resources to produce, as I think that that's where everything starts off from, is that first visual, hook that
Okay.
you're able to get somebody into, essentially your bubble, which is your brand.
Yeah, that's very inspiring to see. I definitely recommend any listener to check out your content. Okay, what is next with XSuit? What is your vision right now for the brand, if I might ask you?
Doing exactly what we've done with the XSuit, and just
Uh-huh.
applying it in all kinds of different items. Whether that be expanding obviously in colors, in different products that are
Mhm.
just auxiliary products of the main suit. So I don't need to tell you, but all the different ones like sweaters, polos, jackets, coats, going into accessories such as bags, and so on and so forth, underwear, socks, whatever a working man might need. We want to establish ourselves as like the go-to performance workwear brand, where anything that you would want to wear at the office, we can supply to you with, of course, low
Yep.
maintenance, high functionality, super
Yep.
comfort.
Nice. Sounds exciting. You shared with us right now tremendous amounts of content and gold nuggets here. I really appreciate that. If you can tell someone, if they're more curious about learning about e-commerce in general and e-commerce marketing, design, and so on, what resources would you recommend to them to check out?
So resources, you've got a lot of courses online. When it comes specifically to content production, since that's something that we highlighted as being quite important, I went through the Harmon Brothers University. So Harmon Brother is an agency that produces some of the most viral videos on YouTube with millions and millions of views. So I went through their university. I think it's great content there. Our company attends both Ad World and Ecom World.
Okay.
Both of those are great to see what bigger brands are doing and to nitpick at their ideas. I'm also on a
Oh.
bunch of different podcasts. I think podcasts are great. I don't think you need much direction for that. Just go on Apple, whatever. I think Spotify has podcasts as well. You just research some keywords like email marketing, advertising, and you'll find a
Yeah.
bunch of people. Again, I don't think there's one specific guru. I think it's great to listen to as many different people and kind of make up your own ideas. Except for that, I am part of some communities on Slack. Something for more startup, smaller companies would be Audit. That's ODDIT
Mhm.
.com. So they have a great Slack channel where they can really help you out with optimizing your website, your ads, your content, and so on, and give you kind of resources of where to look for people and so on. Then if you are in the more developed stages of startup, meaning in the millions of dollars in revenue per year, you can check out Foxwell. So that's Foxwell, I believe. So they're kind of like the level up of audit. These are companies that are doing 3-5 million plus. Again, similar. You can shoot around some information, ask questions, and so on. They'll share the resources. So those are the ones currently that I'm going through. Of course, Twitter, as you very well know, is always a great place to find people.
Awesome. So I'm just showing the website where people can find you. That is XSuit.com. I will put the link into the description so people can check it out. And also I will invite Max to be a guest in our Facebook community. So if you want to contact him, you can just join this Facebook group. The link is also below. Max, really quickly, how can people otherwise connect with you?
The best thing is always going to be my email address. I reply to every single email. I'm on emails 24/7. My email is max@xsuit.com, MAX at the website name. Just reach out by email. If I don't answer that same day, I for sure would by the next day. So that's always the best way to reach out to me.
Awesome. Max, so we're at the end of the show. Again, it was an honor to me to be your student today. I appreciate it. Thank you so much.
It was my absolute pleasure. Thank you so much for having me on, Marco.